Hi, everybody. It's Eric Murray from SugarHuddle.com. Well, it's hard to believe that's already week 10 in college football, and it's already November. Pretty wild how the season has flown by. And I got to say, last week there were a bunch of decent games, but this week there's a lot of really, really good games, and so much so that there were about 3 or 4 games that I decided not to do this week for my weekly college football pick six betting lines and picks. I mean, I could easily have done like a 12 pack because there was just a lot of really good games this week. But anyhow, I narrowed it down to these six. And not surprisingly, the two biggest games of the week will both be SEC games. And we'll get to that in a second. But a lot of really good games. Last week I went 3-3 against both the spread and against and as far as the overall picks. On the year, I'm starting to get a little closer to 500 now. I'm 20-28 against the spread and 22-26 overall. So I'm starting to rebound a little bit. So hopefully by season's end, I'll actually have a winning record. But we'll see. Anyways, so I'm going to go down the line of these 6 games. For my number 1 game, I have number 1 Alabama. They're at number 3 LSU. That's an 8 o'clock game, and Bama's a 14.5 point favorite. LSU, huge underdog at home. And then, of course, number 6 Georgia and number 9 Kentucky, 3:30 game. Basically, is probably going to decide the SEC East. I know I kind of said last week that I thought Florida and Georgia was going to decide the SEC East, but now it looks like it's going to be Georgia and Kentucky. And anyways, Georgia is a 9-point favorite on the road, and for my adjusted line, it would be 9.5. Obviously, I always do the thing where I add the half point, so there's no pushes. Number 3, I've got number 14 Penn State. They're at number 5 Michigan. That's a 3:45 game, and Michigan 12-point favorite, which of course 12.5 on my adjusted line. Number 4, number 13, West Virginia at number 17, Texas. Texas at home, coming off that loss to Oklahoma State. They're a 2-point favorite, 2.5 adjusted line, the 3:30 game. A lot of really good 3:30 games every single week. It seems like that's kind of the prime time for a lot of these really good games. And then number 5 on my list for my college football pick 6. Number 4, Notre Dame, another pretty good test. They're at Northwestern, who's unranked, but very good team, leading the Big Ten West right now. Notre Dame as a road team for the 7:15 start time is a 10-point favorite, 10.5 on my adjusted line. And then finally, trying to get a Pac-12 game in there for this pick 6. Number 15, Utah is at unranked Arizona State, and Utah on the road, a touchdown favorite, 7.5 adjusted line. 4 p.m. Again, these are all Eastern time, so it's actually 1 p.m. out west. But anyways, 4 p.m. Eastern start time. So let me go down the line and kind of give you what I think is going to happen in each game, and then I'll break down each game and kind of some of the things to look for. So, all right, sorry. I'm trying to adjust this stupid thing here. Anyways, as I was saying, so I've got Alabama winning and covering 41-17. I think they're going to win big in this one. Kentucky, I have them covering and actually winning the game as well, 24-21, and a mild upset. Michigan, they're expected to beat Penn State, and like I said, I mean, they're a favorite by, what did I say here? I mean, double-digit favorite, 12-point favorite. I actually think Penn State's going to cover, but I got Michigan winning 21-17. Texas, I got them beating West Virginia by a touchdown. That was a tough pick because I was really tempted to take West Virginia, but instead I'm going to go Texas 34-27, say they bounce back. Notre Dame on the road, I'm going to say Northwestern is able to cover, but Notre Dame will get the win, and so it'll be a 28-20 Fighting Irish victory. And then finally, Arizona State, again, touchdown underdog at home. I actually have them winning by a touchdown, 30-23 over Utah. So those are all my picks, and I want to kind of go down the line here and kind of tell you what some of the things to look for in each game and things that might kind of sway your decisions on who do you think could win and by how many points, what have you. Alabama, they've been steamrolling everybody, 54.1 points per game. They're 8-0 now coming into this game. Obviously defending national champions. Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback, 25 touchdowns, no interceptions, not much else to say. It's got a historic rating. Officially, it's 238.85, which I know Baker Mayfield has a record, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the record is, but I know it's in the low 200s, so he's well above Mayfield's record, if I'm not mistaken. And he's completing over 70% of his passes. But again, no interception, just unbelievable. Doesn't really have to play in the fourth quarter, doesn't really have to play in the second half because they're just killing everybody. Might be the case again tonight. We'll see. Alabama they only give up 113 rushing yards per game, 3.5 yards per carry. And the reason why that's interesting is because if you look at LSU, they average 190 per game and they give up 130 and a half. Alabama, by the way, they have two guys, Najee and Damian Harris, who each have over 400 yards and each have over 6 yards of carry. And again, because they're blowing so many people out, so many teams out, their numbers are kind of, the numbers could be a lot higher. Jerry Jeudy, of course, the speedster, 31 catches, 777 yards, and 10 touchdowns. He's averaging 25 yards per catch. And the thing that's going to be interesting, too, with LSU, they have 14 interceptions, so it'll be interesting to see if Tua finally throws a pick or two, because they've got 14 picks. Grant Delpit, who's one of the better defenders in college football, he's tied for the team lead in sacks with 4. They have 18 as a team, not a real big number, but decent enough. And Delpit himself has 5 interceptions leading the team. John Battle has another 3. And of course, LSU, as we know, Joe Burrow, his numbers aren't real great, but he only has, 3 interceptions, 6 touchdowns. 6 touchdown passes, though, is all he has. 193 passing yards per game, 53.8% completion percentage. The thing we've talked about with Burrow in the past is he's a guy that throughout the season he's really been managing the game quite a bit, and he doesn't make a ton of real big impact plays. And again, you play a team like Alabama. I mean, for as many of the low scoring, defensive minded games we've seen between these two teams in the past, this is a game where I believe you're going to have to score some points, and I'm not sure that LSU can do that, and that's why I have Alabama winning so big. And, of course, Nick Brossett and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, between the two, they have 1,218 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns combined. And then Justin Jefferson, 30 catches, 471 yards, and a couple touchdowns. So the thing about it is, LSU has just one big-time receiver for Burrow to throw to, so that means some of these other guys are going to have to step up. And then again, with the run game, almost 200 yards per game, and they're playing, obviously, a fierce run defense. You look at Isaiah Buggs, 8.5 sacks, Christian Miller, linebacker, 5.5 sacks, 26 as a team. They've only allowed 5. So with LSU, you're going to have some of your other receivers really step up in this one. And Joe Burrow, he's going to have to put up some amazing numbers. Him throwing for a couple hundred yards and maybe a touchdown or two is probably not going to be enough, because I'm not sure that Brossett and Edwards-Helaire are really going to be able to do enough collectively. LSU as a team running against this Alabama defense, I don't expect them to have a 200-yard game on the ground. So I think Burrow's going to have to throw for 300+, and that's going to be the best chance for them to win, is if he throws for 300+, keeps Alabama's offense off the field a little bit, and can throw 2 or 3 touchdown passes. So basically, Joe Burrow's going to have a career day, and then the LSU defense, they have to find a way to pick off Tua a couple times. Everybody's kind of already given Tua the Heisman, myself included. I just think he's hands down the best in college football right now, but still the opportunity looms because he hasn't been challenged yet this year. We all know what he did in the national title game last year, but again, last year's last year, this year's this year. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see if LSU can, with a good, not great pass rush, pretty good pass rush, can they get enough pressure on him? Can they force some interceptions? So Grant Delpit, very, very interesting to see what he does in this game. And then the Georgia-Kentucky game, remember, Kentucky won in a little bit of controversial fashion at Missouri last week with that pass interference in the end zone. Obviously not a real great passing team. You think about Terry Wilson, and his numbers aren't exactly going to knock your socks off. 5 touchdowns, 6 picks. Does have a pretty good completion percentage, over 65%. Averages less than 20 passes a game. And the reason for that is because Benny Snell, one of the best running backs in college football, just under 1,000 yards now, 935 and 9 touchdowns. And, of course, Lynn Bowden, who I actually covered in high school here in the Warren, Ohio area, just outside Youngstown. He's been kind of their big weapon, and it's one of those things where he's the one big guy on their offense as far as their receivers. He's 43 catches, but he's made a lot of really important catches, and he's had some really good games of late. And he had that punt return touchdown last week that got him back in the game. So Lynn's going to be pretty interesting to see what he does in this game against Georgia. And then Josh Allen, the linebacker, we talked about Josh Allen in last year's draft, the quarterback, but Josh Allen, the linebacker, who a lot of people thought was going to enter the draft as well, 2 Josh Allens possibly in the first round. Didn't happen because this Josh Allen from Kentucky, the linebacker, decides to come back to school, and he's definitely helping himself, even though, again, he didn't have to come back to school, but he's been great for Kentucky this year. 56 tackles, 14.5 for loss, and 10 sacks. So, pretty remarkable stuff there. As a team, they have 22 sacks, and I think they have 46 or 47 tackles for loss. So very, very aggressive football team. And, they're going against a Georgia team that has Jake Fromm, who, you know, he held on to the ball way too much against LSU. And, of course, against Florida, he really lit it up, did a really, really terrific job. And he's done a great job of distributing the football this year. He's got 4 different receivers that are five players with 14-plus catches. So no real big numbers. Riley Ridley, 27 catches, 5 touchdowns. Mecole Hardman, 26 catches, 4 touchdowns. But nonetheless, he's good at distributing the football around, really likes to throw to the sidelines a lot. Defensively, Georgia, they're a good defense, but they only have 5 interceptions and 10 sacks. So, it's going to be interesting because Terry Wilson's not a real great passer. And, if Benny Snell, if they're able to shut down the running game, the Kentucky running game, it's going to be interesting to see what Terry Wilson can do in this game. It's going to be interesting to see if Georgia, they have that big game as far as takeaways and sacks and really put the pressure on Terry Wilson and the Kentucky offense. Because remember, last week against Florida, it was one of those things where Felipe Franks had a very, very, so-so game, and he started to really make some mistakes down the stretch as Georgia's defense really started to clamp down. So if Georgia can replicate that, they're going to be in pretty good shape. But, if Kentucky can kind of study that LSU tape and find a way to do some of the things that LSU was able to do, running the football, kind of keeping Georgia off the field and really forcing Jake Fromm to hold on to the ball a lot or even just straight up sack him and force him to make some bad throws because he's feeling the pressure, Kentucky's got a great chance. And again, they're at home. It's in Lexington. So it's going to be a very, very interesting game. And we'll see what happens. But again, it's probably going to decide the SEC East at this point. Should be a really, really fun game to watch. And again, I really just picked the Alabama game as number 1 for the Pick 6 this week because that's the game everybody's talking about. But realistically speaking, it may not even be a top 6 game because it might be a total blowout. So I think, honestly, this will be a hell of a lot better game, to be truthful with you. So we'll see. But anyways, and then of course, also Elijah Holyfield and DeAndre Swift, they have over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns combined. So it could be very, very interesting to see how the Georgia running game does against this Kentucky defense, very aggressive defense. So very defensive-minded football game, and it's going to be very, very fascinating to see how these two teams do. And speaking of running the ball and playing some defense, at Michigan, 7-game winning streak now, trying to get into that college football playoff top 4. Obviously, if LSU loses, Michigan will easily get in there, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. But, this is an interesting matchup because you've got 2 pretty similar quarterbacks when you think about Shea Patterson, the Michigan quarterback, and then obviously Trace McSorley, the Penn State quarterback. Both guys, undersized quarterbacks, both kind of a similar style of play, almost like a Johnny Manziel type quarterback where they're undersized and where they're very scrappy and very, I guess you could call them gritty. They're both guys who can run around and make things happen with their feet, and they can get also a little bit creative in the passing game. And, Patterson, 12 touchdowns, 3 picks, 8.3 yards per attempt. So much better passer than Trace McSorley is this year. McSorley's only completing, I think it's 52.8%. His completion percentage has been in that 53-ish range all year. And I think he only averages about 7 yards attempt. So, Shea Patterson's a much bigger impact player in the passing game. But, of course, McSorley has a whole bunch of yards rushing. And actually, I have it right here for you. McSorley, 52.8% passing. But he has 12 touchdowns, 4 picks. So his number is pretty much the same in that regard as Patterson. Patterson's still a better passer. But 617 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns. I think a big difference, too, for Shea Patterson, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Penn State, they drop a bunch of passes, and they don't have that guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones who, of course, is also a threat as a punt returner, one of the best punt returners in college football. But receiving-wise, he's a big home run hitter. We saw that in that touchdown he had against Michigan State a couple weeks back. But again, Penn State doesn't have that. They've lost some of their best weapons within the last year or two, of course, when you think about Saquon Barkley, even though Miles Sanders has done a great job stepping in for him. And then Mike Gesicki, the tight end, and then Deshaun Hamilton, who now is actually starting right now for the Broncos after that Demaryius Thomas trade. So, Penn State doesn't have a whole lot of playmakers in the passing game, and that's and with some of the drops, that's part of the reason why McSorley has had some struggles. But Patterson's a little bit of a better passer. Both of these teams really love to run the football. Penn State gives up 161 yards a game, and Michigan averages well over 200. Penn State offensively, they average 225, and they've scored 27 touchdowns. So this is going to be one of those games where it's a possibility that if one of these defenses doesn't show up, you could end up having one team holding on to the ball for 35 plus minutes and finding a way to bleed the clock and win this game. And again, it's November football in the Big Ten. Field conditions, even if there's rain, will be fine because Michigan plays on turf. But nonetheless, I mean, it's still a very, very interesting matchup. Remember, with Penn State, all these games are down the wire. They're 2-2 in their last 4 games, and in two losses, they've lost by a combined 5 points. 1 point loss to Ohio State, 4 points to Michigan State where they lost at the end there, and then of course the 2 wins by 11 points combined. So, Penn State, they're gonna make it competitive. They're gonna keep it close. They've got 28 sacks on the year. They're pretty aggressive, and it'll be interesting to see what they do as far as getting after Patterson. But, overall, I think it's going to be, again, one of those matchups where whoever can run the ball better is probably going to be able to bleed the clock and win this football game. And I think with Michigan, the fact that you have, again, a guy like Peoples-Jones, that might be the difference because you're going to need probably 1 or 2 big pass plays to ensure a victory. And then the fourth game, of course, like I said, big matchup in the Big 12. West Virginia is at Texas. Texas was a rough one last week. Saturday night game at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State 30th anniversary of Barry Sanders, Heisman, wearing throwbacks. Real charge-up atmosphere, and they had that big lead at half. Texas rallied back, but Oklahoma State was able to hold them off and win by a field goal. And you got to give Sam Ehlinger a lot of credit. He's another guy very similar to McSorley and Patterson as far as build and style of play, and a guy that got banged up in that game and came right back and played really, really well down the stretch, but just wasn't quite enough. And defensively, the way their secondary fell apart in that was very, very disappointing. Really got picked apart, and even their front seven got picked apart. So that's the thing. Their defense can be really good, but they're giving up like over 24 points per game now, so they're not really anything amazing. They can be real great when they want to be, and there's a lot of other times where they're not real great. And then we saw it, of course, down the stretch against Oklahoma where they were up by 3 touchdowns and almost lost. So Texas's defense is really kind of taking a step back from where they were. And, when you're playing a team like West Virginia, they're a pass-heavy team, obviously. Dana Holgorsen, they average, I think, 146 or 47 or 48, between 146 and 148 rushing yards a game. Again, they're not a run-first type of team by any means, but, through the air, when you got Will Grier, he's a guy that was kind of a dark horse Heisman, borderline, top 5 Heisman favorite kind of guy coming into the year. Right now, kind of a dark horse because the Iowa State loss a couple weeks ago. He throws a few picks here and there, but overall, Grier over 70% completion percentage. You expect that in that offense. 25 touchdowns, 7 picks, 188.74 rating, 10.4 yards in attempts. So, much like Taylor Cornelius against Texas last week, there's definitely opportunities to pick apart this Texas secondary. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens there. That's an interesting thing, too, is they've got 3 wideouts, West Virginia, that are all over 500 yards receiving. David Sills, who, of course, is very well known, 529 yards and 9 touchdowns on 37 catches. And then Marcus Sims, Gary Jennings Jr. So it's kind of an interesting thing because, if you're Texas, you've got 3 different guys who really could beat you in this football game. And Will Grier's going to have an opportunity to really spread the wealth. So I think that's a concern I have. But the main reason why I'm picking Texas is because they know that this is a big game for them to still have a shot to possibly get to the conference championship game and win it. And so they know how badly they need to win it. They haven't had a real great home field advantage in the last decade at home in Austin. But I think they're going to find a way at home to get the job done and really bounce back from last week, get that bad taste out of their mouth. And obviously, Sam Ehlinger, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Remember, West Virginia, just 10 interceptions as a team, so not a real big number. And, for Texas, of course, we've got Lil Jordan Humphrey and Colin Johnson. Those 2 guys collectively didn't do a whole lot against Oklahoma State, not real big games at least, like we've seen them a lot of times. But, collectively, they have almost 100 catches for over 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns combined. And I expect them, West Virginia's got a pretty competitive secondary, but I do expect them to both have pretty good games, and one or both could easily go over 100 yards, and that could be the difference. So obviously it's going to be a lot of scoring in this game. It's Big 12, you expect that, but overall and Texas only 8 interceptions of the team. So neither quarterback's going to probably turn it over at all in this game. Maybe one turnover, and that could be the difference. Is that one or two turnovers? So we'll see. But I'm going to give Texas the benefit of the doubt and say they win the game. But West Virginia going in there on the road, we'll see. Notre Dame, their schedule down the stretch is really going to start to weaken a little bit. Although they do have Syracuse, who's on the rise, coming up here soon, but this is arguably their last tough challenge for the rest of the regular season. They're 8-0, playing Northwestern at Northwestern. Of course, Notre Dame on the road is a big favorite. And Northwestern, Pat Fitzgerald, that typical kind of Big Ten Midwestern blue-collar team that doesn't have real amazing athletes, doesn't put up real big numbers or anything like that, but they just go out and get it done. And 5-3 leading the Big Ten West, so obviously this game doesn't affect them in that regard because it's obviously not a conference game. But still, it's gonna be very interesting. Clayton Thorson, NFL prospect at the quarterback position. He's a guy who's a lot better than his numbers because he doesn't really have hardly anybody to throw to. 10 touchdowns, 10 picks. Flynn Nagel's his number one receiver, 59 catches, 711 yards. After that, there's a huge drop-off. The second best receiver, I don't even know how many catches that guy has because it's a pretty low number. I think it might be in the low 20s, high teens. So really it's kind of Flynn Nagel or nobody else as far as the Northwestern passing game. And that's going to be something that Notre Dame's going to definitely try to take advantage of. But as a team, they only have 8 interceptions, so they're not exactly a super opportunistic defense. They got a pretty good pass rush. Jerry Tillery with 7 sacks, so they're going to get some pressure on you up front, and that could be an issue for Thorson. And, another thing, too, is Notre Dame average almost 200 rushing yards a game. Dexter Williams, 512 yards and 7 touchdowns, just under 7 yards a carry. Miles Boykins, receiving-wise, 570 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. So they've got some weapons. Ian Book's got some guys to throw to, unlike Clayton Thorson. And, of course, because of that, Ian Book doesn't turn it over nearly as much, just 4 interceptions, and he's averaging 76.5% completion percentage. Book's, for the most part, been very, very exceptional ever since he took over for Brandon Wimbush as a starting quarterback earlier in the year. The interesting thing in this game is really when I was kind of looking at all the numbers and kind of breaking it all down, the one thing that initially kind of stood out to me with Northwestern is, they're a very, very disciplined football team, and they're number 2 in the nation when it comes to penalties. They're the second least penalized team in college football. They only get penalized 3.3 times per game for 30.6 yards per game. So that's 26 total penalties. And number 2 in the nation. So you look at that and say, that helps them against a lot of teams. It's probably helped them against a few teams this year. But then you go back and you look at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is just the 13th, 13th least penalized team in college football. So it's like one of those things where if you're Northwestern, you're trying to find any leg up, any advantage you can. And one big area, penalties, where you think you have a big advantage, Notre Dame proves that no, you don't have an advantage there because we're pretty disciplined as well. So, 2 pretty disciplined football teams, and that probably is going to mean a little bit of a leg up for Notre Dame because they've got the weapons, they've got the offense. But Northwestern, they're going to be competitive, they're going to make it tough on you, and that's why I think Northwestern covers. But I just think in the end, Notre Dame's going to be a little too much, and that's why Notre Dame will actually win the game. But again, Northwestern's going to find a way to cover. And then finally, Utah, Arizona State. Unfortunately, my beloved Trojans, they looked like crap against Arizona State. They rallied, but they couldn't get it done, and Arizona State was able to win it 38-35. But Arizona State, Herm Edwards, they're a team. They're 4-4, just 2-3 in the conference. But here's the thing: they've got 4 losses that are all by 7 points each, 28 points combined. So even when they lose, it's going to be a down to the wire football game. And Utah is a team kind of like a more athletic version of Northwestern, where they're kind of a blue-collar team that isn't always going to knock your socks off when it comes to production. They just kind of find ways to win. And, the thing with them, Tyler Huntley, he's got 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, averaging a little over 200 yards passing game, 212.5. By the way, Utah 4-game winning streak after losing back-to-back games to the Washington schools. And they're a team, again, like Northwestern, where they have one guy who's the big receiver. In this case, it's Britton Covey, 48 catches, 531 yards. Outside of that, their number 2 receiver in terms of receptions, that's 21. So it's kind of one of those things if you're Arizona State, if you can kind of stop one guy, you're really going to have a great opportunity in this one. And they've Utah has 21 sacks, so they're a pretty aggressive football team, but they also allow 21. They've also allowed 21 sacks. So one of those things that for Arizona State, there's really an opportunity there to make some things happen and maybe get a couple of key takeaways. And Manny Wilkins having a real good year, 12 touchdowns, a couple picks. Benjamin, 166 carries, 938 yards, and 9 touchdowns, really doing a heck of a job there. And Arizona State does have 21 sacks. Again, 21 seems to be that number for this football game. So, again, that's kind of the thing. Maybe they can get a sack fumble or something like that, and that could be the difference in this football game. That's why I like them by a touchdown. They only have 3 interceptions, though, so that's going to be the thing. It's going to have to be a forced fumble if it's going to be a turnover that decides this football game. But nonetheless, those are my college football pick 6 picks for the week. We'll see how it all turns out. But anyways, I'm going to get back to you tomorrow, and we'll go down the line and see how I did. So please go to thesugarhuddle.com. Check out all the content on there. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and also go to my Facebook page, which is The Sugar Huddle. Take care.